It was Wednesday, October 10th, 2024, just before midnight. I was 26, a freelance photographer, and driving cross-country to a wedding shoot in the morning. I'd been on the road for hours, and I needed a quick stop to rest. I wasn't picky about where I stayed. It was just a motel for the night. I pulled into the Lakeside Inn, a small budget motel located off I-90, about 20 miles outside of Erie, Pennsylvania. It sat on the edge of a lonely stretch of highway, surrounded by dark woods. The neon sign flickered weakly in the cold night air, casting an eerie glow over the gravel parking lot. There was a small hum from the air conditioning unit on the wall, but it wasn't loud enough to mask the faint sounds of distant traffic. The room itself was nothing special. Piles of folded towels on the bed, an old-fashioned phone with the cord twisted into a knot on the nightstand, and a small TV with a static-filled channel, no remote. The whole place felt like it had been stuck in time. The faint smell of disinfectant mixed with the stale air that didn't quite clear out the mustiness. I figured the room was probably fine for a quick stop. The motel owner was older, maybe in his 60s, with a weathered face and a hurried demeanor. He handed me the key, barely making eye contact. He didn't say much, just mentioned that I should be careful on the roads and then turned away, disappearing into the back office. I didn't think much of it at the time. After all, it was just a quick pit stop. I locked the door, checked the windows, and let the stillness of the night settle around me. Nothing dramatic, nothing unusual, just a lonely motel room. It was nearly midnight when I finally settled into bed, exhausted, but not quite ready to sleep. The TV flickered a few times before I turned it off, leaving only the hum of the air conditioner and the occasional rustle of the outside wind. I pulled the sheets up and closed my eyes, letting the fatigue take over. Then I heard it. Footsteps. I wasn't sure at first, but they were unmistakable. Slow, deliberate steps pacing outside the door. It wasn't the sound of traffic or a car passing by. These steps were heavy, methodical, almost like someone walking back and forth in front of the door. My first instinct was to rationalize it. Maybe someone was walking by. Maybe it was a guest, someone coming back from the vending machine or a late-night stroll. It wasn't anything I needed to worry about. But the footsteps continued. I held my breath for a moment, trying to focus on the sound, the heavy, measured pacing. It stopped right outside the door. I got out of bed and approached the peephole. I didn't see anything, no shadow, no movement, just the faintest glow of the dim motel lights reflecting off the wet pavement. I let out a slow breath, trying to shake off the unease creeping into my chest. But that was when I heard it. A knock. Not a soft, casual knock, but a deliberate one. A quick, sharp rap on the door, followed by silence. I opened the door cautiously, expecting maybe a guest who had gotten lost or perhaps someone in need of assistance. But there was no one there. The hallway was empty, just the faint smell of old carpets and cleaning supplies hanging in the air. I closed the door, my heart beating faster now. I double-checked the lock, convinced I was imagining things. But that was only the beginning. I tried to push the unease out of my mind. I locked the door again, double-checking the chain, then lay back down, determined to get some sleep. But sleep wasn't coming. The hum of the air conditioner seemed to grow louder. The stillness of the room felt heavier. It wasn't right. Something was off. I lay there for what felt like hours, staring at the ceiling, willing myself to fall asleep. Then, it happened again. I heard movement outside the door. More footsteps, but this time they sounded like they were pacing, walking back and forth just outside. I tried to Ignore it. Rationalize it. Maybe it was a guest moving around. Maybe it was the night clerk making their rounds. But then, the lights flickered. Not the neon sign outside, not the overhead lights in the hallway, but the bulb in the room. The one next to the bed. I froze. It wasn't just a flicker. The light dimmed, then it brightened. Then it flickered again. I glanced toward the door. The pacing outside the door stopped, but in its place was a low sound, a soft, constant scratching noise. I looked toward the window. The curtains were drawn tight, but I could see the reflection in the glass. I saw something, someone, standing outside, just beyond the reach of the dim light. A figure. I jumped up, heart racing. I turned around quickly, but when I looked back, the figure was gone. A chill ran down my spine. I stumbled back, my breath coming out in short, shallow gasps. I grabbed my phone to check the time, 2:00 a.m. It felt like time was stretching, becoming more and more twisted as the minutes dragged on. Then, I got a text. The number was unrecognized, but the message was clear. Stay inside. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Something felt wrong, but I didn't know what. The pacing, the knocking, the strange figure in the window, it was all too much. I moved quickly, locking the door once more, trying to stay as quiet as possible. My body felt tense, like I was being watched, but I couldn't figure out from where. The door handle began to rattle. Slowly at first, then faster. Someone was outside. Someone was trying to get in. I grabbed my things and hid behind the bed, barely breathing, trying to stay as still as possible. Then, the door rattled harder. A loud bang echoed through the room as something heavy collided with the door. I called 911, my voice barely a whisper as I described what was happening. But as I spoke, the call suddenly cut off. The rattling stopped. The banging ceased. But the silence didn't feel like relief. It felt like something, waiting. The minutes that followed felt like hours. The room was suffocating. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, drowning out everything else. I didn't know what was happening outside. I didn't know if I was safe. But the silence was shattered when I heard a voice. It wasn't loud, it wasn't clear, but it was unmistakable. "Let me in." The voice came from the other side of the door, muffled, but still close enough to send a shiver down my spine. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The handle rattled again, this time harder than before. I could hear the sound of something or someone scraping against the door, not knocking anymore, not pacing, but scraping, like they were trying to get in. The air conditioner clicked off suddenly, leaving the room eerily quiet. I waited, and then I heard sirens, not outside my door, not immediately, but close enough. I held on to the hope that someone had heard me. Someone had called the cops. The rattle on the door stopped as quickly as it had begun. I stayed hidden, too afraid to make a sound. The sirens grew louder, closer, but the door remained still. The rattling had stopped, but the fear stayed with me. A knock came again, gentle this time. A voice, calm and steady. "Police, open up." I didn't hesitate. I unlocked the door, careful not to make a sound. The officers stepped inside, their guns drawn but their expressions puzzled. There was no one outside, no intruder, no figure in the window, just the hum of the air conditioner and the quiet of the room. The officers cleared the room. They checked the windows, the bathroom, the closet, everything, but they found nothing. The motel manager arrived shortly after, giving a hasty apology. He didn't seem surprised by the situation, almost like he knew what had happened. As the officers left, I grabbed my things, prepared to check out. The manager's final words stuck with me. "You didn't hear about the other guests, did you?" I walked out of that room as fast as I could, not caring about the cost. As I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't the first person to be watched in that room, and I knew I wouldn't be the last. Before we get into the next story, if you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next upload. And if you enjoyed these stories, please do like, comment, and share. It was Saturday, April 14th, 2025, around 9 Oz p.m., and I had just finished a grueling 12-hour shift at the local hospital. I was 42, a traveling nurse, and my assignment had taken me to Jackson, Mississippi. I didn't know much about the area, just that it was a small city, and I'd be here for a few weeks before moving on. I didn't have the energy to go searching for a nice hotel, so I picked the closest place on the map, Cedar Park Motel, located on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, but it was cheap and available. The place looked old, weathered, with an outdated neon sign that flickered on and off in the dimming light. The parking lot was empty, save for a couple of cars parked under the eaves. As I stepped inside the office, a musty smell of old carpets and disinfectant hit me right away, the kind of smell that seemed to stick to everything. The man at the desk was an older gentleman, probably in his mid-60s. He looked up as I entered, and for a moment his eyes studied me before he spoke. "Checking in?" he asked, his voice gruff but polite enough. I nodded, feeling the usual exhaustion that always seemed to cling to me after a long shift. The man handed me a key card but then paused. "You'll want to make sure you follow all the rules here," he said, voice suddenly sharp. "No smoking in the room. No loud noises, you understand?" I gave a quick nod, a little taken aback. It was a strange way to start a check-in, but I figured he was just being thorough. I took the key card and headed for the room. The room itself was small but clean enough. A floor fan ran on high, the soft hum adding to the stale, artificial air from the ventilation system. A small "no smoking" sign sat on the bathroom mirror. The walls were adorned with cheap paintings, and a loud ticking noise came from an old clock on the nightstand, each tick making the air feel heavier. I locked the door behind me, turned on the TV, and collapsed onto the bed. I was too tired to care about much else. I was lying there, half watching some random channel, when a thumping sound broke the silence. It wasn't loud, but it was odd, like something heavy being moved in the room next door. I paused the TV, listening closely. The thumping continued for a few more seconds, then stopped. I couldn't make sense of it. Maybe the walls were thin, maybe the neighbor was just moving around. I convinced myself it wasn't anything to worry about. But then, the phone on the nightstand buzzed. I didn't know why I felt uneasy, but I did. Something about the buzz seemed off, but I shook it off as the usual motel quirks. I picked up the phone and saw a text from the motel manager. "Please keep the noise to a minimum." I was confused. Had I made any noise? The TV was barely on, and I hadn't moved. I glanced at the clock, 9:45 p.m. Maybe they were just strict about quiet hours. Still, the message felt like more than just a reminder. I settled back into bed, but the weirdness didn't fade. The ticking from the clock seemed louder now, more insistent. Then another thump, louder this time, coming from the same room next door. I tried to ignore it. A few minutes passed before I heard a sharp knock at the door. I stood up and hesitated. Was it the manager? Maybe he had something else to say about noise. I walked cautiously to the door, peeking through the peephole. Nothing. No one was there. I opened the door slightly, peering into the dim hallway. It was empty. I closed the door quickly, now feeling a sense of unease settle deeper in my chest. I checked the deadbolt again, and with one last glance at the window, I tried to distract myself. Maybe it was nothing. But then the thumping started again. I couldn't ignore it now. It was getting louder, more pronounced, like someone was pounding on the wall next to my bed. I shot out of bed, heart racing. I rushed to the door, knocking twice, trying to get the neighbor's attention. I had to know if something was wrong. When I knocked, the thumping abruptly stopped. It was then that I noticed something strange. The clock on the nightstand had stopped ticking. I glanced around, feeling the weight of the silence settle. My mind raced, trying to rationalize everything. Maybe it was the plumbing, or the building settling. I was overthinking things, I told myself. Then the door handle rattled. Not violently, just a quick rattle, like someone was trying to test if it was locked. I froze. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I stepped back from the door, my heart pounding. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. The rattling stopped as quickly as it had begun, and I stood there waiting for something, anything, to happen. I picked up my phone and texted the manager. "Is everything okay here? I keep hearing noises." No reply. I checked the time. 10:10 p.m. A full hour had passed since I arrived, and the only thing that had changed was the rising tension in my chest. I went back to the window, my eyes scanning the parking lot, but all I saw was the dim glow of the flickering sign and the shadows of the trees. The air felt colder now, and something was off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew something was wrong. Suddenly, the TV turned off by itself. It wasn't a glitch or a power surge, just a quiet flick of the screen fading to black. I rushed over to the TV, my breath shallow, and tried to turn it back on. The remote didn't work. The buttons on the TV itself were unresponsive. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled as I turned, walking toward the door, and that's when I heard it. Whispering. Soft at first, like a whisper from the walls, then louder, more frantic. I turned quickly, heart hammering in my chest. The sound came from the ventilation system. The whispers echoed through the room. I couldn't breathe. The air in the room had become thick, suffocating, as if the walls themselves were closing in. I stumbled toward the door, my hands shaking as I grabbed the handle and tried to turn it. It didn't move. It was locked. The key card wouldn't work. I pounded my fist on the door, yelling for help, but no one answered. The whispering grew louder, the sound of someone, shuffling behind the walls, and the temperature in the room spiked. I could feel it. I moved to the window, hoping to escape, but the glass didn't budge. It was sealed shut, as if the room had been designed to keep me in. Then the lights went out. Complete darkness. In the pitch black, the whispering became deafening. It was everywhere, filling my ears, my mind. The walls seemed to close in tighter with each passing second. The air was thick, suffocating. I grabbed the lamp from the nightstand and swung it toward the window, desperate to break through. The glass cracked. The sharp sound rang through the room, but the glass didn't shatter completely. I wasn't free. I heard footsteps outside the door, quick, urgent. I moved to the window again, smashing it with the lamp one last time. The glass broke fully this time, and I climbed out, my legs scraping against the jagged shards. I didn't stop to look back. I ran to my car, jumping in and speeding away from the motel, not caring about the cost. I just needed to leave. The next day, I went back to the motel. It was quiet now, no sign of the manager. I asked the new clerk about the room. They looked at me like I was crazy. "There's no record of any incidents there," they said, glancing over the computer screen. "But, next time, make sure you double-check the window lock. It's for your protection." I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't the first one to experience this. Sunday, March 2nd, 2025. It was 2:30 a.m., and I was starting to feel the weight of the long drive. I was 30, a solo traveler on a road trip, just passing through Oregon, on my way down the Pacific Coast Highway. My goal was simple: drive, take in the sights, get some rest. The plan was to stop at a cheap, no-frills motel for the night, rest up, and hit the road again by morning. After a couple of hours of driving, I came across Pine Ridge Motel, tucked deep in a forested area along the highway. It looked like something out of a ghost story. Isolated, quiet, with the road cutting through trees that swallowed up any hint of civilization. I parked and walked up to the office. The manager, an older man with a tired look in his eyes, handed me the key with barely a word. His smile was stiff, like he was trying to be polite, but didn't quite know how. "Room 8, he said. "Don't leave your room." He added it almost as an afterthought, his eyes darting to the side as though he didn't want to look at me. The air was thick with the smell of dampness and pine, and the flickering porch light above the room made the motel look even more forlorn. As I unlocked the door, I heard the howling wind in the distance through the trees, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Inside, the room was basic. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, buzzing intermittently, and the fan by the window was running on high, pushing around musty air. The window curtains wouldn't fully close, leaving a thin sliver of night creeping into the room. On the bed, an unusually high pile of clean sheets was stacked. Odd, I thought, but not alarming. The room was cold. It wasn't the kind of cold that comes from an open window, more like an unnatural chill in the air, like the room had been empty for far too long. I tossed my bag on the bed and tried to shake off the feeling. I glanced around at the small details: a no smoking sign in the bathroom mirror, a loud ticking sound from the old clock on the nightstand, and the musty smell of the carpet. Everything was functional, if not exactly comfortable. But the unease didn't fade. I turned on the TV, hoping to distract myself. The static-filled screen flickered, and then the sound of something was louder than the TV, rhythmic knocking. At first, I thought it was the building settling. But the knocking was consistent, like someone was tapping on the walls and floor, a slow, deliberate pattern. I turned off the TV, listening for a moment. The knocking didn't stop. I stood up and walked to the door, but the sound seemed to be coming from all around me, not just the walls. The wind outside howled louder now, pushing the trees with a force that felt unnatural. The flickering porch light outside caught my attention, blinking erratically as though it was struggling to stay on. I shook my head. "It's just the wind," I whispered, trying to calm myself. Then I noticed something strange. The door, which I had locked behind me, was slightly ajar. I walked over and checked the handle. It was locked, but it didn't feel like it. A strange sense of déjà vu crept over me. I closed it firmly, making sure it was locked again. Then I heard the air conditioner kick on. It was sudden, and the blast of cold air made my skin crawl. But worse, as it kicked in, a strange, foul odor wafted through the room. A musty, sour smell that made my stomach churn. I stepped back, my eyes scanning the room, looking for something that would explain the strange behavior of the room, the flickering lights, the foul air. That's when the text from the manager came. "Don't leave your room, they'll find you." I froze, staring at the screen. Was this some kind of joke? I sat on the bed, phone still in my hand, staring at the message. The air around me felt dense, thick, like the room itself was holding its breath. I couldn't understand the manager's warning. Who was they? Suddenly, there was a loud bang on the door, startling me so much that I dropped the phone. My heart pounded as I rushed to the door, my fingers fumbling with the lock. The knocking stopped as quickly as it had started. Silence. I stood there for a moment, listening, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe someone had knocked by mistake. But then came the rhythmic knocking again. It started from the floor this time, a tapping that seemed to echo in the room. I pressed my ear to the wall, trying to pinpoint the source, but there was no clear direction. The noise seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. I jumped back when the phone rang, an incoming call from an unknown number. I picked it up, heart racing. "Hello?" Silence. Then a low, raspy breathing on the other end. Not a word, just breathing. I slammed the phone down, terrified now. Something was wrong here. Something had shifted. The lights flickered again, this time much longer. When they came back on, I noticed the shadows had changed, stretching unnaturally along the walls. A cold shiver ran down my spine. The door handle turned slowly. I ran to the door, grabbed the handle and yanked it open. Nothing. No one was there. I stepped back into the room, trying to collect myself. My hands were shaking, and my breath came out in short bursts. Then, the most disturbing thing happened. The phone rang again. This time, it was a different number. It was the motel's number. I didn't even hesitate before answering. No one spoke, just more heavy breathing. The door opened behind me. I turned quickly and froze. There, standing in the doorway, was a figure. A shadowy figure taller than me, standing perfectly still. I couldn't make out any features, just a vague outline, like they were waiting for something. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. It just stood there, as though watching. I backed away, heart hammering. The lights flickered again, and when they came back on, the figure was gone. I ran for the window, hoping to escape, but it wouldn't open. It was sealed shut. I turned, searching the room for any way out. The figure had disappeared, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I grabbed my things, heart racing, and rushed for the door. But as I reached it, I heard the knocking again. But this time, it wasn't just on the walls. It was on the door. I grabbed the doorknob, trying to turn it, but it wouldn't budge. I yanked harder, the door shaking under the force. The room was growing warmer, the air stifling. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight. The knocking grew louder, the breaths on the phone growing heavier. With one last, desperate effort, I grabbed the chair from the desk and slammed it into the window. The glass cracked, but didn't break. The knocking stopped. But the phone rang again. This time, I didn't pick it up. I had no choice but to break the window, climbing out through the jagged glass, my arms scraped and bleeding. I ran across the motel grounds, my legs carrying me faster than they ever had before. The night air was cool, but it didn't calm me. I could still hear the knocking, the phone ringing in the distance. I reached my car, jumped in, and sped away, not daring to look back. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest town, where I finally pulled over to catch my breath. The next morning, as I recovered, my phone buzzed. It was a text from the motel. "Did you enjoy the show last night? Hope you got out safely." I dropped the phone, my stomach dropping with it. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever happened in that motel was never meant to end. If you have a true story you want featured on The Wrong Silence, send it to thewrongsilenceagemail.com